Okay, okay, we should be okay now. Yes, good morning, everyone. Apologies for slightly hesitant start, but welcome to our second week together. Now, Miguel, who was a new lady, tried to join last week, but she couldn't get on. Is she here today?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, right. What was your first name again, please?
Anitra.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. So last week we started our journey and we talked to begin with about the concept of drawing up a balance sheet when we're dealing with personal clients, and a little bit later when we start to talk, about small business accounts. In that situation, we should have a balance sheet from the business. And basically, whether it's a personal balance sheet or a business balance sheet, the idea will simply be, it's struck in at a moment in time balance sheet. So, this afternoon after you finish class, if you wanted to draw up your own personal balance sheet, you could do it then, or you could compare that with how it was, maybe a couple of months ago or a year ago, whatever frequency you want. So basically, it's a statement of assets and liabilities. And as we discussed, generally, getting this type of information generally can be a little bit difficult, particularly when we come to the liability side. So quite often you'll find clients are quite, forthcoming in the discussion with you in terms of what assets they have. Well, if in fact they have any, they may only have like a motor vehicle, if they're renting their property, they might not have very many assets at all. And then the difficult part really is to try and get an extraction of the liabilities. And then when we take one from the other, it'll be the same looking at a small business, same looking at a medium size business, and then the same looking at a large corporation. And if you're sufficiently interested, sometime you might want to pick, your favorite large corporation. And one of the powerful things about the internet, of course, is the information that's available. So you could go on to a large corporation website, for example, on the Wealth Manager program, which is, a follow-on program to the one that you're on. We look at Walmart from the US, and then we take a look, at their balance sheet, their income statement, etc. So Walmart's balance sheet, although it's obviously more complex, because it's got lots more items in there, but the principles are exactly the same. It would be a list of assets and a list of liabilities, and then one from the other will give, Walmart's business net worth. Now, the net worth, is known by various things when we're talking to business people. Some people call it the equity base, some people call it shareholder funds, some people call it shareholder funds and reserves. So there's all these different terms, which is why for many years we've preferred to use the term net worth, because it's quite a meaningful statement. What is your personal net worth? And this will help us in terms of our financial planner journey, because the whole idea is when we can get this information, we can look at the liabilities with the client and see if there's any scope for trying to get those reduced, and we can look at the assets and see, how the assets are performing. Is there any scope maybe for considering more of a portfolio management approach, which you'll do as this program progresses through the modules. So that was the idea of the balance sheet. Anyone got any comments on that balance sheet before we turn to the budget planner? Was everybody's okay with that? No questions on that, no?
So we won't be doing the income statement, just the balance sheet.
Yes, we'll be doing the income statement when we look at the businesses. Yes, of course, because the income statement, you know, the way the business performs, if it's generating a profit, you know, then if there's any retained profits, they'll move into the capital and reserves position in the balance sheet. But we'll come to that a little bit later on. So that's
Okay.
fine. So that's the personal balance sheet. And when we look at the business balance sheet, you'll see it's similar in concept. And then the difference with a personal client is, you know, you've just mentioned the income statement. Well, the income statement for a person really is this sort of budget planning document that we've got there, where you can see, you know, what are the expenses, what's the income towards the bottom there, and is there a surplus? And then when we look at a business income statement, it'll be very similar, except the top, you know, the top line of any business that you look at, with the exception of financial institutions, because banking balance sheets and income statements are a bit different to you know, every other type of business. But when we look at sort of 99% of the businesses you'll be looking at, we'll have sales at the top, and then we'll have a lot of costs which will be managed in different sequences. And we'll talk more about that, you know, as we progress through this particular module. But it's the same. So all the expenses will be deducted from the sales position, and then at the bottom of the income statement, we're hoping to see a profit, just the same as we can see on the screen there. When we're looking at the budget planner, we're hoping to see a surplus position. So keeping that in mind, once again, as a refresher from last week, let's return to the John Edwards case. Now, I know the material setups, you know, with it being exported into a PDF, some of the page numbers are a bit kind of difficult. But if I go to my page 56, I'm hoping that'll bring me back to the Edwards case study that we started to look at last week. Yes, there it is. So if you can all find that in your materials. And remember, when we started to look at this, we decided we use the Campari framework. You remember the Campari framework, you know, setting it out in sequence there. And we started to talk about the beginning of the Campari, which was C for the character. And Dimitri very quickly assisted our discussion on that by saying, well, he thought John Edwards' character was okay because he's had a satisfactory account for quite a number of years. And also he has, you know, been honest enough to come and seek our assistance in terms of what he can actually do with the situation is now in. And we saw from the case study, when we looked further down, that he's put forward, let me just try and enlarge this. There we go. He's put forward two options. So you can see there in the third paragraph, option one is he's going to ask his bank, the bank, for a loan of $2,500. And that'll help him clear his overdraft balance, his mortgage arrears, and to pay outstanding bills. And in terms of the Campari, you will see A stands for two things. One of them is the amount. So what we could do is we could make a calculation to see if this amount, you know, covers what he's seeking there. So we would look at this. So $2,500. So if you want to make a note, option one. So we're looking at clearing the overdraft. So that's $950. The mortgage arrears, 900. So that's, we've got 950 and 900. And then pays outstanding bills. Let's see what they are. Bills are 300. And then he's got car repairs there, 150. So option one, we've got 950 plus 900 plus 300 plus 150. And I make that $2,300, which would give him a little bit of leeway if he's asking for a loan of $2,500. So that calculation looks okay. Now, option two is he's going to ask the bank to consider taking of the debts he has to finance companies totaling $3,000 and pay off his credit card balance to give him a total loan requirement of $7,000. So option one was $2,500. Option two is the total there of $7,000. So let's check the maths on that. So what we need to take is the total calculation that we had for option one, which was the $2,300. Now I've got something come in the chat box and I need to open this. Yeah. Okay. So we start with the option two calculation, picking up our 2,300 that we had. And then we've got to add on the debts he has to finance companies. Of 3,000 and paying his credit card balance. So let's pick up the credit card balance. Yes, Candice, you have a question?
Not so much a question, sir, but based on what you're saying with the 2,300, I don't know if that calculation is correct.
What do you make of
Well,
it?
when I calculated, the 2,500 for option one will not be sufficient, and also the $7,000 calculation there isn't correct. I think you would need about 7,600 to cover all of the expenses.
Can you talk us through your calculation then, Candice?
My calculation here is basically for the debt is the standing out of the $800, the building society standing out of $900, bills totaling to $300, car repairs $150, and then the credit card approximately $1,500. So I rounded it off to that. When you add those up, you get 3,650 plus his overdraft balance $950. So when you add those together, that's 4,600. And then he wants to pay off the finance companies, which is a total of $3,000. So when you add that together, then you get the 7,600.
Okay, well, I think the difference between your calculation and mine is I get the 2,300 plus the 3,000 plus the 1,500. So I get 6,800. So you and I are 800 adrift with each other. And I think the reason for that is what you've included is his monthly standing orders amounting to $800. Now I didn't include that because I didn't see from the script here that was actually, in arrears.
Well,
So-
what I did was I take it based on what we're trying
That's
to
true,
do here,
yeah. Sure.
as a certified
That's fine.
financial planner. And
Yeah.
basically in this role, we're trying to see how best we could assist the client. So if we're
Right.
trying to see how best we could assist him and get him out of debt, I just thought to take all of that into
All of that,
consideration. But I guess I'll wait until we go along, and then when we go through my scenario, you'll be able to see how, because in my mind, you're trying to put a little credit back But my thought also was just to cancel the overdraft and also the credit card, but we'll get there.
Well, no, we're getting there right now because this this is part of the discussion, and what we'd obviously need to do, kind of in the real world, what we'd need to do next is what would we do next with Edwards to kind of verify whether, what figures he actually needs and what he can actually afford. Because we've got a lot of information that's missing at the moment, which will be typical, on our financial planner journey. So what have we got that's missing? Well, there's a lot of stuff. What would we want to do with Edwards?
Well, like you said, using the budget planner, I would
That's
have
it,
used
yeah.
the budget planner, and then
Exactly.
also I did the compare analysis. So running down that,
Yeah.
checking out the character, the ability, the margin, the purpose,
Yes,
the amount,
yes.
repayment, and insurance. And then looking at, like you say, the financial and then the non-financial part of it, which is the risk. And so that would be my reason for factoring in the 800.
800, yeah. Okay, very good. That's very good, yeah. And I'm not having a very good day today because I've just lost my picture on Zoom. Not the picture of me, but the picture of the materials. Can you still see the file on the screen?
I can see it up to the top, but it's not highlighted for you to click it.
No. Okay, just give me a second, everybody. Sorry about this. I did get off to a bad start, and that's kind of continuing. Sorry. So let me stop that. And let me try again. Well, I can see your name up there now, Benitra. So welcome to the program. Sorry you couldn't make it last week. Did you receive the recording from Mikkel? If you could switch your mic on, that would be good.
Was that a group question or directed to the person?
No, that was directed to Benitra, yeah, because she didn't make it last week. If you can't get your mic working, just put it in the chat box. Okay, so yes, I've got it back on there. So the next thing to do would be, to do just as Candice was mentioning there, and hope everyone else agrees. We need that budget planner, and we need a lot more detail, about what his expenses are than what we can see on the one-page brief that we've got so far. And then there's the point that Dimitri mentioned last week where, we're told that he's going to get an increase in his salary. But the point is we're going to need, verification of that. And it might well be confirmed already, and he might be able to, give us a written verification of that. But that would again come in, on the top line there.
Hey, Mr. Key, I got the recording from Miguel.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Benitra. Yeah, welcome to the program. Thank you. Yeah, so doing that, then we can see, from the budget planner. So if I go back to the budget planner, we can see, where we're getting onto this. Anyway, I hope you'll agree. Last week I was better organized than this week, so sorry about this. So there we are. There's the budget planner. Yeah, it's a case of sitting down with Edwards, or at least having conversation by telephone if he can't come in. But I think you'll be able to come in
8,
to
9,
see
10,
you.
11.
Yeah, and there we are. We go through, go through these items, in some detail. And as Candice was mentioning, she was going to build in this potential bailout situation that the $800 of standing orders, so we could discuss that with him as well. And then when we get to the bottom line position there, you know, we're hoping that he should have a surplus position, and our presumption from him having moved house is, you know, he's had a lot of expenditure, you know, which wouldn't be, you know, within the normal monthly expenditure. So we're hoping either option 1 or option 2 will help him get back on the straight and narrow, as it were. So any views on whether you would like to go for option 1 or option 2? Now, there's no right or wrong answer with this, because it depends partly on the approach of your particular financial institution, you know, whether they would let you take over the debts of the finance companies, for example. You know, some institutions might not wish you to do that, standing, you know, in the shoes of the other debt providers. But that's just have a bit of a discussion on that. So what do you think? I could go back to Candice, and she's right in on this case already. What do you think, Candice? Would you go for option 1 or 2?
Can you remind us which page can we find in the source? We can look at the options again, please.
Yeah, sure. That's in the Edwards case. It's page 56, Dimitri. Try go to page 56. It's 56 on mine. Might not be 56 on yours, but it should be close.
Dimitri, it'll be best if you look for page 9. It's just the last page before you get to module 2.
Right.
Client relationship skills.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the alternative is to go to page 9 just before module 2. You can see page 9 on the printed material. But in the PDF, if you go in the PDF and type in 56, which I've just done, it should take you to Edwards. You got it? You okay, Dimitri? You found it? I can hear you flicking through the
Yes,
paper.
sir. Yes, I found it. I found it.
Excellent. Okay, so come on then, Dimitri. What do you think? Should we go for option 1, which is the smaller loan amount, and recommending that, which is kind of a partial clearance of the situation, or should we go for a fuller position, you know, which the late President Obama would call his bailout, wouldn't he? You know, bailout or bust was one of his expressions. And there we are. The second one there, I'm not suggesting that Edwards is going to go bust, but the second one, you know, is more of a clearing of the position. Some people call this consolidation, don't they? The consolidation technique. So, so again, all the words, you know, the words are different. We've just got to make sure that, you know, that we're on the same page in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And this, you know, this is one of the difficulties, and we'll talk about this more in module 2 on client relationship skills. Client relationship skills is difficult. It's not technically difficult, but it's personally difficult, because, you know, the people you meet are going to be very different, and the businesses that you look at will have different business scenarios. So, you know, these things are going to be a bit difficult. And we'll look at a couple of video films in the relationship skills, you know, to see some good techniques and some techniques that's quite not so good. So while I'll be talking about that, has anyone any thoughts on which option they would prefer to do?
Morning.
No. Okay, Dimitri. So I'm Mr. Edwards now. So you know, I'm asking you, you know, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Which option do you think I should go for?
I would go for the second option.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because when you consider consolidation because it if we're using it to tie it towards the equity that he has in his home,
Yes,
it's going to give him a better interest rate and a better term, which
yes,
is going to give him a much lower mortgage payment. Option one is only putting a band-aid on his issues,
uh,
short-term
yeah.
band-aid at a
And
higher
Sophia,
interest.
Sophia, you were going to say something there? So
Pardon me?
Dimitri made a good comment there. It's like a band-aid. That's yeah. In the UK, we call it a sticking plaster. You use the American term, I think, band-aid. Yeah.
So, so that's going to be a higher loan rate
Yeah.
over a shorter term,
Yeah.
and that's also depending on when his promotion will kick in, which will give him
Yeah.
additional funds to be able to service that loan.
Yeah.
I noticed in the breakdown of the case study,
Yes.
the bank has not paid his his building society for the last 3 months, which means
Yeah.
that there is a need there.
Yeah.
So if we look at option two, in option two, also with paying off the credit card, I would also decrease the balance on the credit card as well,
Quite as well. Yeah.
paying it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Giving a total loan requirement of 7,000. That's going to
7,000.
allow him to also clear all his arrears as well.
Yes.
And then it's going to give him a 5-year loan, which will give him the flexibility to use any additional payment now whenever he does get his promotion towards paying now on the principal of the loan at a much quicker rate.
So
And then taking
Dimitri,
it.
I'm not sure if you're online a bit earlier, but Candice was questioning the $7,000 because according to her calculation, she thinks it would be $7,600, but this would be subject again to the discussion with Edwards. Okay, well that's fine. Anyone? So Candice, listening to what Dimitri has been saying, would you favor option two or option one?
Yes, I would favor option two,
Mhm.
but he said, and I like his analysis on it, and
Yes,
also with decreasing the credit limit.
yes,
I mean, it's good because the client gets to keep a service
yes,
and still making the funds. But like I said, when I think long term and I think about what our goal would be as
mhm,
a financial planner,
yes,
I feel as if for now, in order for us to assist him so that he would be able to pay all the bills that he have, I
yes,
would just cancel the credit card, cancel the overdraft facility for now, because
mhm,
as we know, he's supposed to be getting some increase later on.
yes,
Because I'm looking at the overall to see how best we could assist the debt service ratio. And
yes,
based on my calculations, we would be able to decrease it probably by 11%. It's still not much. Um, but in time, we would see that he's on the right road, headed in the right direction for savings.
excellent. Now look, in terms of what you just said there, in the longer term, so one of the key issues in this case is if we moved forward with the option two situation, what would we do with Edwards in terms of looking at this as it progresses? So what I'm trying to get at is, would this be a case where, you'd want to monitor the case? And if so, what's the timescale you'd like to put on it? Would you want another meeting with him in, say, 2 months or 3 months or 6 months? What would you think, would be good financial planning control, as we move forward? So it's not like a policeman control. What we're trying to do, is work with the client and not just kind of put the file away and think, well, that's the end of Edwards. That's sorted out. Because as you're saying, if we help him out of this situation, we're really going to need to do what? What do you think will happen? What would your suggestion be?
I guess for me, what I would do, Mr.
Yes.
Checkley, is I would probably, once we have this conversation, and again, I'm trying to change his behavior and his mindset
Yes. Yes.
towards his finances. So
Yes.
even though, I'm not taking the stuff away from you and saying, no, that's it, you can't have it. We're saying, okay, for now, let's see if we can curve this. And within the next 6 months, let's see, we can review your financial statement again to see exactly where you're at. Hopefully within that time too, based on the budget, I
Yes,
think I looked at him having, I think at the end of the month, he should have about $406.58. So if he
right.
does get that increase of 150, that should take him to about 550 some dollars. So let's look at if only saving a small portion of that. So within the next 6 months to a year, you would be surprised to know the little revenue that you could begin to look
Mhm,
at. And
mhm,
then again, like I said, we can possibly start to look at whether or not we can look back at a small overdraft facility or
mhm.
credit card. And if I have to choose between the two, I'll probably start a small limit
Yeah,
to support what Mr. Mackey said
yes,
with a credit card.
yes, I think, yes, yes, I would agree. So monitoring control, you'll find this a bit further on in your notes. And this is towards the end of the first section there. 17 in the PDF file that I've got here. But basically what we're saying, and with Edwards, is yes, you know, we based on his character and based on the other information, and then subject to all those calculations and verifications, we would like to help him. And if we help him with option 2, it gives him a chance to get sorted out from what we believe, you know, is a situation that's occurred through him moving. So it's not occurred, you know, because he's been overspending, as far as we can gather from the information that we've got so far. So on that basis, as Candice was mentioning, you know, you should start to build up a surplus each month, but we want to kind of keep working with them. And that would be good financial planning, because as time goes on, you know, maybe as time goes on, there'll be some scope, you know, for starting to do some savings, some type of savings plan. And then also, we haven't asked, you know, about Mrs. Edwards. You know, is Mrs. Edwards, you know, looking after the children full time at the moment, and will she be, you know, maybe returning to work if she's worked before? So, you know, that's going to help the situation if she's got an income stream coming in as well. But thinking of Mr. Edwards alone for the moment, monitoring and control would be vitally important to ensure that the client's savings undertakings and debt commitments have been honoured, just like you've both been saying there, and the other people I'm sure have been thinking, and that the financial profile is performing in an acceptable manner. So he will see, you know, that we're keen not just to help him, but keen to keep our finger on this going forward. So only by using this monitoring control can we quickly identify and discuss any deterioration in the situation and help give some early positive advice. So key controls will be, you know, accurate recording, accurate data on the file, such as been discussing there, and then diarising the event and review dates should be set to ensure the client is comfortable, you know, with the financial information that we're being used in accordance with the arrangements, and, you know, loan repayments are up to date. So prompt reviews should also enable us to identify any adverse trends. Excuse me a second.
Mr. Checkley, I would also put in there the fact that the client did not have any savings case of any major financial issue that may arise. So
Yep,
I would also put inside there as well, putting together savings plans as well,
yep, yep.
based on the amount that he's going to have left over after the
Excuse me.
consolidation, and after we would put him back on his feet financially, because usually you would see where once person start to put themselves in a better position financially, without taking into consideration growing a large saving in case of emergencies, we may be back at the same position if something happens, let's say
Something
medical
happens.
wise with one of his daughters, or his car goes down again because he's not getting a new vehicle, he's just getting it
He's
replaced.
repairing it. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this
So
is what one of the ladies was mentioning last week, and forgive me, I'm not sure who it was, but you talked about rainy days, and we discussed how many rainy days we've been having, and this is exactly the point that Dimitri's picking up. So it's a very good point as well. Okay, well, let's leave Edwards there for the moment, and we'll come back to some of the relationship aspects in this. Now, before we move into starting to look at some of the small business issues, let's just look at another personal client case study where we'll find the situation is quite different. So we're going back to those cases which are, as you've pointed out, just before we start on module 2. Now, this is the case of Jane Brown, and if you want to do what was suggested earlier, you could look for page 6, in these case studies just before module 2, or you could take the plunge on the PDF and go to page, it says 53, let me check that. Yeah, should be page 53 in the PDF.
3 pages back.
3 pages back, thank you. Okay, here we go. So Jane Brown is a sales representative for a computer company. She's 35 years old and has worked for a current employer for 5 years. She's had a bank account for the last 3 years. Her monthly salary credit varies with the amount of sales commission she earns, but averages $1,000. In recent months, she's been regularly taking bank overdrafts on her account in anticipation of, excuse me, receipt of salary credits. The range of the account has been 700 debit to 515 credit. Mrs. Brown calls to see her. She's in the process of getting divorced from her husband, and the divorce becoming final next week. The Browns have no children, and the clean break divorce settlement has been agreed, from which she will receive $30,000. Past year, she's been living with a new partner, Jack Martin, who she intends to marry as soon as her divorce is complete. Martin owns the flat in which they're living. Brown and Martin wish to use the divorce settlement monies to buy a 6-month timeshare in a property on a new development in Florida. Timeshare will cost $60,000, provided they can complete the purchase quickly. They are therefore asking to borrow $60,000 immediately, of which $30,000 will be repaid from the divorce settlement. They would expect to be able to repay the residual loan over 10 years from renting out the timeshare when they're not using it, and they're willing to give you a mortgage over the timeshare as security. So analyze financial position, and what would you recommend? So let me just give you a couple of minutes to think about that, and then we'll discuss it. Excuse me, I've just seen a message in the chat box from Dimitri. Mrs. Brown sounds Bahamian. Marisol's made comment as well. Okay, I'm just coming in on my iPhone because the advantage of that is it means I can see the chat messages coming in instead of keep missing them as I am. Okay, now do we have any other speakers this time other than Kandri? So Dimitri, you would like to maybe start us off on this Jane Brown case? Come on, now don't be shy. So, you know, thinking of the Campari again, what do we think about Jane Brown's character then? Anybody going to make a comment on that? Other than what Dimitri's already said, Mrs. Brown sounds Bahamian. Excuse me.
I think she has a good character outside of management of her funds. We see that she is a representative for a computer company, 35 years old. She's been employed for 5 years, which shows she has some stability. The only thing is that she's had a bank account for the last 3 years, which means there was 2 years where she did not had a bank account while she was working. Um, See where she is. Her salary is based on commission mostly.
Mhm.
Um, I wouldn't say that it's a very strong character, but it's not a very a weak character either overall.
Mhm. Okay,
I
so
wouldn't.
you're heading down the Campari. Then what about, you know, what about the purpose of this? So are you happy with the purpose of it, that they should
mm,
be going ahead
Not
with this?
not completely,
No?
because with timeshares, it would also depend on it's a seasonal, I would say, income.
Mhm.
So taking out such a large investment, timeshares does not take in consideration major global events such as COVID, or the war that's happening in Ukraine, or let's just say they've been speaking about the country going into some type of recession once again. These are the things that you will have to take in consideration, while also the fact that she does have a need in reference to how she manages her account with the overdraft facility as well.
Yes.
Her debits is more than her credits, and her average balance is significantly low. So I can understand the need for an investment in reference to receiving this new funds, but I would consider the risk in reference to what they're doing, the risk in reference to the investment that they're taking on at this point in time to be very high.
Yes. So Maricel was struggling to find the case study, but you've got it now at page 6. Thank you. And 3 pages before John Edwards is another way of getting there. Yes. So Dimitri's just mentioning the risk of the investment, and who would like to comment on that? Because what they're saying is, you know, they're going to get this 30,000 from Jane's, you know, previous husband, and they're wanting to borrow 60,000 to complete the purchase quickly. So do you think that's a risky thing to do, such as Dimitri is suggesting?
I agree with Mr. Mackey.
Mhm.
I think it's indeed risky. It's indeed a very high risk financially and non-financially.
Come
Also,
on
I
in.
think there's a lot of red flags.
Right.
One of them that you point out, she's 35 years old, been employed for 5 years, only had a banking account for the last 3 years.
Mhm.
Here in the Bahamas, the average person should start employment by the age of 18.
Right.
So there's a lot of information. So I think we would really need to look at the budget. When we look at the Campari, when I
Yep.
think of the character,
Yep.
based on You know, and in your terms, you talk about
The
the risk and
budget
the
plan.
math.
Yeah, yeah.
Putting math together, there's a lot of stuff missing. So I don't find the character to be too strong. I don't think there's much, she has much ability to pay. And I would probably recommend her. I would try to coach her against doing something like this. Because if you're
Yeah.
just coming into all of this amount of money, you would want to invest it in something else.
Yes, so that's very good. So there's two strong messages coming out there. One, as a starting point with her, would be to encourage her to provide us with the information that we would want to go through that budget planner document again. So we can, as a starting point, we can say, well, let's just take a look, what's happening with your existing situation. Before we talk about any possible investment, whether it's a timeshare or whatever. So we could backtrack and try and work with her on, what's her income coming in there. It says average is $1,000. What's her expenses? And let's make that as a starting point. And then we could talk about where she is now, in terms of she's now living with Martin in the flat. Does she contribute towards any expenses in the flat? And what about the flat? I mean, it says he owns the flat, but what's the value of the flat or the apartment? And then equally important, what's the liabilities against it, so we can see what his liability position is there. And then we can talk to her about this $30,000. Now, the $30,000 has been agreed. When is it going to be received? Would be a very important question I'd want to ask.
That's true. And we also
Yeah.
didn't take in consideration that she's going to be married once again when she comes for this application. You did mention that we would have to now take in consideration um, her new husband's financial
Yep.
position as well.
Position, exactly,
So,
Mr.
so we're
Martin.
going to have a complete conversation. Additionally,
Yeah.
what would be the bank's position in holding an asset? When you look at the bottom, it
Yep.
says that the timeshare is a part ownership of a property,
Yes.
whereby each participants buy the rights to use or let the
Use the
property for
property.
a fixed property period annually. So,
Yeah.
how comfortable would the bank be with using that or taking that into consideration as an asset? And usually, where you see the bank has to hold an asset that they're not 100% completely where they feel completely safe with, then usually
Uh-huh.
that means that the interest rate is going to be much higher as well.
My other question would be, switching to the timeshare as a potential investment, is timeshare is a part ownership of a property where you get the right to use or let the property for a fixed period annually. Now I'm not a collateral or a security expert, so would want to take some legal advice on that, but I don't think the timeshare would qualify as collateral for the bank, because I think behind the timeshare will be, the timeshare property owning company or management company or whatever, or development company, who will have the property as an asset. So I don't think a timeshare could be offered as collateral. So that would be another red flag, as you described it a bit earlier on. So I'm not sure about that. And my other point would be, they're saying when they can't use it, they'll let it out. But as Dimitri said, what sort of rental income are they going to get from that? Will that be fluctuating? Yes, it will. It'll depend, on what the demand would be, etc., etc. So I don't think this is a good idea at all. And what also worries me is, when will the $30,000 be received? Now, it's one thing, for Mr. Brown to have agreed, yes, you will get $30,000, as the divorce settlement. But the next thing is, when will that be paid? Now, with a divorce settlement, yes, it could be quick. Maybe it'll be within the next month, but maybe it could be a year or more. So the source of that $30,000 at the moment unknown. And what they're doing is they're making this assumption straight away, oh, we're going to get the 30, we could get 60 from the bank, so we can make this quick purchase of a timeshare. So I think in this case, we've got to slow the thing down. And I think, again, under the relationship skills, if Jane Brown comes in to see you, she's going to be absolutely full of enthusiasm, isn't she? Because, she's getting rid of the old guy. She's getting $30,000. She's obviously happy with Mr. Martin. They're going to get married, and here's a chance of getting their own place as well in Florida, for timeshare vacations. So she's going to come in full of enthusiasm and expecting, you to be saying, oh, yes, 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 yes. Instead, you're going to have to sound some notes of caution. So, yes, I like what Dimitri's saying. What I really like from what Candice was saying is we can slow her down by suggesting, well, just for the moment, should we start, by looking at your own personal situation in terms of your management, of your bank account with the budget, etc., etc. So anyone else got some more comments building up on what I've been saying there? So we're gonna
Good morning, guys. I do agree with all the statements made, whereas, and it really is a risky investment, and she is moving really quickly.
yes,
Being excited about this pending money that she is looking forward to receiving.
yes,
And I would agree in redirecting probably her focus into, like Candice had said, with the budget plan, like analyzing
yes.
her liabilities and debts right now. Although
Right now, yeah,
thankfully, it seems as though her debts aren't really a lot, but her
No.
her source of income isn't really stable.
no, it's not.
Yeah, earnings or commission. So that's pretty risky. And just to go ahead, with these big planned ideas of, okay, we'll get loan, and she has a great idea and source of gaining or trying to find another source of income besides her job now, but
Yes,
she has to think for the now and trying to maintain or provide further sources of income, and what she have now, that'll be more reasonable and capable for her to achieve.
yes, that's right. No, what we could say to her, yes, we'll help you, as we've just been discussing, with where you are now, and then when you get the $30,000, come back in and see us, and we can talk about alternative investment plans where you can supplement your income by making investment, but by trying to make what we would consider a safer investment, than a timeshare situation where you're not just investing your $30,000, but you're taking on, debt financing as well. And as Dimitri started off by saying, it's risky. It's risky because, if they don't get any rental income from it when they are, not using it, what's the financial situation that, that Brown and Martin are going to be in. And we don't know Mr. Martin's situation. He might have very good income. He might own the flat that he's in. It might be clear of mortgage. We just don't know. So again, as Dimitri and Candice were saying, we've got to get much, much, much more information on this. So to begin with, we need to play for a bit of time, to try and cool her down a bit from her excitement. So it's going to be quite a difficult interview. I suspect it's going to be much more difficult than the interview that you would have with Mr. Edwards, where okay, it's going to take a bit of sorting out financially, but with Jane, there's a lot more going on the non-financial side, which we started to talk about a little bit last week.
But Mr. Checkley, in
Yes.
finance,
Yes.
you come across some clients who, no matter what, their minds are completely made up.
Exactly. Yeah.
in this situation, I almost feel like Mr. Martin may be the sales representative for
Timeshare.
this timeshare. He's taking advantage of, an excited new
New
single
prospect.
person, right? But in those situations when you can't change a customer's mind, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You being a financial planner,
that's it.
would you say that we speak to the customer and say, okay, if your mind's made up on this, let's just see how best we can help you with this, even though from a financial standpoint it's a really bad idea, but it is the customer.
Yeah, but
Um,
yeah, but
what would
Dimitri, Dimitri, who's going to lend them $60,000 to purchase a timeshare? Would be my question to you.
Well, we would now have to, the customer is now going to depend on us to come up with a financial plan to make it happen. In this situation, I mean, we can look at taking Mr. Martin flat as free and clear. We
Right?
can look at
Okay,
using that as collateral because
okay.
that's a more acceptable collateral,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
if they don't want to be exposed completely,
Yeah,
30,000 down on the timeshare, and then you taking 30,000 equity from the flat,
on the flat. Yeah,
which is still a very bad idea because
yeah,
like my classmate mentioned,
yeah.
her income is based on
Commissions.
sales,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
So if at any point in time she has a bad 6 months,
yeah,
they're not only looking at a bad investment, but now it's
yeah.
also going to put Mr. Martin at a place where he may possibly lose his home.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things in this case. This case is not straightforward whatsoever. But as a straight loan request of 60,000, it's just not feasible, is it? You're working your way around it by saying we'd look at what Martin owns, etc., etc. Yes, that would change the situation from the collateralization of the position for the bank, but it doesn't change the risk. The risks are still going to be there on the income or the potential downturn of the income. So you're pointing out lots of good things. Marcel's agreed with all the points as well. That's good. Yep. So that's Jane Brown. We can't really take it much further. It's a hypothetical case. Dimitri's early comment about it being a Bahamian lady straight away was quite amusing, but maybe not so amusing for the Bahamian ladies who were in our audience today. And also his comment about Mr. Martin maybe working for the timeshare company as well. Oh boy, right, okay. On that happy note, let's take a 5-minute break, and then after the break, what we'll do is we'll have a change of direction, and we'll start to talk about some small businesses and see, if we can start to get a better understanding of businesses, which we really, really will need. And there was a young man on this program a few years ago who made the comment about, the language in business. And as you'll discover, the language in financial planning, and Dimitri would discover the language in risk management, there are a number of obstacles for us, but we just need to, get familiar with this. And the idea of the starting point of the program will be to familiarize you with some businesses. So after the break, we'll start on that. So just a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 10 minutes past. Thank you. Okay, everyone, let's restart. Just doing the sound check if someone can confirm they can hear me. Because when we've had a break, sometimes the sound goes down. Okay, Sophia, thank you. Okay, so in part one, I hope you can find this. This is, let me just check the page number. It's page 19 in the PDF file. And follows on, you know, from the monitoring and control we were talking about.
Which page is it in the book? Sorry.
19, try page 19. Let me know when you got there. Okay, found it, Dimitri?
It says page 1, but it's just a page after monitoring and control on page 13 in the book.
Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so in part one, we looked at the various methods and templates for starting the financial situation analysis. You know, that was the budget plan that we were talking about and the personal balance sheet. So in this section, we move on to look at the more complex situations where the clients are relying on business trading performance for their income ability. Now, it could be taken as a salary or a dividend or both, depending on the business structure. But we'll begin our analysis by looking at some key areas of business performance. Now, I'm showing this in a diagram. Diagram should be studied carefully in order to avoid the pitfalls of reviewing the client with little regard to the business, its net worth, or serviceability. So just like before, you know, we're going to be looking at those two aspects, you know, the financial analysis, and as was pointed out last week by some of you, the importance of the non-financial analysis side. So both sides very important there. So we're going to need to look at the client and the type of business they're in. What's the structure of the assets in the business, which can vary, considerably. You know, a trading style of business will be carrying quite a large amount of stock or inventory. And then on the opposite side, you could have some type of consulting business, you know, where basically there's very, very little in the balance sheet, but most of the information we're going to be getting will be from the income statement. Is there any collateral in place? If they've got debt, what's the repayment ability and the serviceability of debt? So just as you would have, you know, payback ratios and ideas set by your central bank, but when we look at businesses, the payback ratios are a little bit wider in terms of picking up, you know, the cash flows of the business as well as the income statement. So if you want to make a note, there will be three key documents in terms of the financial side, there'll be the balance sheet, just as before, the assets and the liabilities giving the business net worth. There'll be the income statement, which will be the sales, less all the costs, hopefully giving a net profit or a loss. And then the third document, which really is, today as important as it was all those years ago, the third document will be the cash flow. And cash is very, very important in each and every business. And then the monitoring of business performance. So just as before, when we talked about monitoring the Edwards situation, what sort of things are in place for monitoring business performance. And we tend to call that, management and management accounting information that we can get. And it doesn't have to be complicated. A management account could be as simple as, what were the sales last month? What were the sales the month before? What are the sales this month? And then do they have any projections, what the sales might be, going forward in the business? So just like before, we have to take a common sense view. We've got to get to grips with some of the technology, but, we will get a good understanding of business and business performance. So there's the assessment, in diagrammatical form. The customer, so it's KYC again, who is the customer? What do we know about them? And then the various points we've just been discussing so far. Now, this diagram should be studied carefully in order to avoid regard to business net worth or serviceability, or with strong asset structures. So one of the peculiarities in business is you could look at a balance sheet with a strong asset structure, but when we look at the income statement, maybe the income generation of the business is quite poor relative to the assets they're employing. And a classic example of that here, not in Bahamas, because you have very little, well, if none, on the agricultural side, but in the UK, we have a lot of farming finance. The farming sector is very large, and typically in the farming sector, the assets employed, such as the land, particularly if they're an owner of the land, and then the machinery, a combined harvester machine for harvesting the crops can cost around $150,000. So these things are expensive. So in agriculture, you get a huge amount of assets in the balance sheet, but the income generation from a farm can be relatively low. So that's an example there. So if any of these key areas are ignored, problems will be encountered sooner or later. So we need to make a full assessment, just like we're encouraging before, to reach a balanced judgment. And this is very important. You could highlight this. It's vitally important to remember that a business, just as I've been saying, no matter how strong its balance sheet, cannot carry a debt burden greater than can be serviced by the income earning capacity of this business. So it's for this reason great emphasis must be placed on understanding the trading profile of the business, and this will be displayed in the trading and profit and loss account, commonly known nowadays as the income statement, and is projected in a projected profit and a projected cash flow budget. And we'll come on to the projections a little bit later on, after we've done some analysis of an existing business. We'll talk about the two main types of projections and what should go in and what should not go in the two major budgets, the profit budget and the cash flow budget. So just stating some very basic generic points, the following will help. The cash flow forecast will tell us the business income streams and what's to be done with the money and how much is required to fund the difference. The plans for dividend payments and repayment of any debt will be illustrated again in the cash flow forecast. And the feasibility of these payments will be looking and shown in the margin available in the profit from the income statement, together with the record of past profits in the audited accounts or the unaudited statement of affairs that are produced. The investment margin or buffer or net worth will be illustrated in the past audited accounts and in any projected balance sheet going forward. Now, turning slightly to the non-financial side, the technical ability of a client. A key feature in any business analysis will be the technical ability of the client. Now, if they're in a very, straightforward sole trader business or small partnership, there might be car repairs in a garage, there might be plumbing installers in central heating. Not central heating, Bahamas, central heating in the UK. In the UK, it would be your plumbing for your dishwashers or whatever. Can builders lay bricks to the standards required by the inspectors, surveyors? And then what about the directors? If it's a small company, can the directors manage the business successfully and to the satisfaction of the shareholders? There may be some more shareholders than just, the persons who started off the business. So there'll be no source of income if the applicant does not have the skills to satisfy reasonable customers or shareholders. So that's just some thoughts taking us on the non-financial side. And then that lovely word again, the integrity, the integrity of the proprietors. So again, we're KYC, know your customer again. Checklist approach could be helpful here for you. How long has the client been known to you? And here we go again. What's the track record? Same as with the person, what's the business track record? How many years have they been in the business? How has it been performing? If not known before, why is the client making the approach to you? Very important point. Maybe, it's very genuine, or maybe it's because their business account has not been performing too well and they're having difficulties with their existing bankers. Can evidence be shown of an acceptable track record elsewhere if they are new coming into you? Does the client have any business experience, especially in the area of trade? And you'll find this, and we don't want to pick up on Dimitri's point about Bahamian lady. This could be Bahamian man, where he decides he's going to go into so-and-so business because he's been discussing, over a couple of drinks with some of his friends, and they've told him what a good idea it is to go into so-and-so type of business, but actually he's got no experience of that, so that's going to be really difficult for him to succeed, unless he's very good at adapting into this new type of business. Important point on the financial side, what is the client worth financially, and how is the net worth of the person being accumulated? Quite a tricky question to ask, and quite a tricky question to get answers to. What's the client's personal commitment to the business? Is a personal guarantee being offered where the borrowing will be a limited company? So that's a collateralization issue there. And does the client have adequate life and health cover? Now, what about the business itself? When dealing with significant size clients, then visiting the business, if possible, will yield a lot of information. And we'll have a video film on this in the module 2, where we'll look at a business visit by a consultant, and we'll see the sort of questions and the answers they get on the business visit, and also in the materials for module 2, you know, we'll have a business visit checklist which you can adapt for if you're making one. You know, you might never make one in your particular job, but at least you'll have the information. And there should always be someone from the organization, you know, visiting the business to see the information you can get out. Most people are receptive and willing to show you around. And here's a non-financial analysis point, that your observation and your discussions will enable you to make a judgment as to technical and management ability. You know, you go to the place, you know, is it reasonably neatly set out, or is it just like a shambles of stuff all over the place? You know, to succeed well in business, you know, there will need some good processes in place. Now, I know there's exceptions, but generally, you know, the actual observation will help you. What's the customer's experience? We asked that before. How long in business? Are they using modern techniques, or is it a very old-fashioned style of business? Nothing wrong with that if it continues to be sustainable as they go forward. Are they in full control, or do they spend a lot of time away? So that's a key point. What's the depth of management ability? Who's there to help? Do they delegate routine tasks, or do they try to do everything themselves? And then a final point there, very, very important, who keeps the business records and what sort of state are the records in? I remember visiting a business many years ago in the UK. It was a farming style business that I've been mentioning. I went along with the bank manager to try and give them support on analysing the farming situation. And I asked the farmer, I said, you know, who keeps your business records? And he said, well, I keep them. I said, well, can I see some of your records, please? And what he did was he went underneath the table in the kitchen area that we were sitting in, and he brought out this box, and he just put the box on the table, lifted the lid, and he said, there's my records in there. And all that was inside, you know, with lots and lots of pieces of paper of invoices and stuff like that. So the level of recording can vary. Now, by contrast, I visited another customer who was in a paint manufacturing business, you know, where they were putting all the additives in and then selling the completed can of paint. And this man was totally opposite. When I asked him about the business records, he took me into another room where there were 6 people all working away on the computers, and they were costing all of the various items, and the business records, you know, were down to point something of each pound. So that was totally the opposite, where this man was totally obsessed by, you know, recording like everything he could possibly record. You'd see the business size and learn about the products, the state of the buildings and machinery. Does the place look well organized? Have the buildings and the machinery the capacity to meet the production plans? That's if it's a manufacturing business. And do they have any business plans that we can discuss with them? Any comments on that bit so far? Anyone made any business visits? Excuse me. You don't have to give us the name, but it would be good to know anyone made any business visits and what did they make of it? Anyone visited a hotel client or a restaurant client or anything like that? One of my first visits to Nassau, I was taken by Miguel down to Arawak Quay. And you can guess why we went Arawaki. We went to a few places there, and we also saw at the time, I think it was Goldie's Bar. I don't know if it's still there. And they had all the conch shells. And of course, I'd never, seen conch coming from the UK. These huge shells, and he was taking the conch out of the shells. So very, very interesting. And I asked Miguel quite a dumb question. I said, "Well, why is he called Goldie?" And he said, "Well, just look at him." And of course, he had gold there and gold on his rings and everything. So very important. Go and see the business. Any comments on that then? Even if you've not visited the business, do you think it makes sense that someone should go and take a look?
Yes, I think it is important in my line of business.
Uh-huh.
I think we have a client that has a film company, and
What, sorry?
just to see if they had a film
Yeah,
company, a
okay,
production
right.
company.
Yeah, production, yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, and what you're going to say? I interrupted you, sorry, Janique. So why would it be important to go to see the film company?
Yes, we wanted to see it because that's something that they don't space. They can, like, I guess.
And what are you looking for if you go to the business? What are you looking for?
It is to see if they hired anybody, if
Uh-huh.
the business license is current,
Yes.
the regulatory things that would be either up on the wall or if they can just present it to us.
Uh-huh.
We had an incident with that, so I had to go and just to see if they were operational,
Yeah.
physical presence.
Mhm. And what about the equipment? Do they have equipment?
Well, yes, they did. They actually
Uh-huh.
did, but it was not at the office location. They had to take us to where they were producing,
Uh-huh.
like they would rent out, not they, but they would borrow other people equipment and rent it out
Right.
like that. It wasn't here, it was in the US. So
Oh,
we
okay.
wanted to act, because a lot of fraudulent activity goes on over there. So
Yeah.
we wanted to make
Yeah.
sure
Yeah. Make sure it was there. Yeah. Yeah.
a legit company, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Another business I visited was a steel stock holding business. So they were holding stock of steel and then on selling it to building companies and what have you. And when I looked at the balance sheet before I went, there was a huge amount of stock in the balance sheet. It was valued about $250,000. And then when I got to the steel stock holding site and I went in there wasn't any steel at all. So, so that was a very much of a red flag before I went into the director's offices there and started to talk about where was the steel. So yeah, thank you for that, Trinique. Thank you.
Morning. I know we call it site visits.
Yes.
Know that when we did a review of a very cash intensive business,
Right.
given the size of the business and given how long the business um, was open, based on the balance sheet and based on the information that they was presenting to the bank,
Uh-huh.
the amount of income that they said that they were earning was a bit far-fetched. So a
Yeah.
site visit was conducted,
Uh-huh.
one to confirm that the location of the business was where they said it was. Two, it was to take a understanding or get understanding of the foot traffic that's
Yes.
happening in the business, to see if the amount that's being earned weekly is actually happening based on the
Yes.
amount of traffic that's actually happening in the business.
Can we
And
estimate, what type of business it was without giving any names? What type of business?
it was an alcohol business.
Uh-huh.
So the amount of monies that was being deposited, and the amount of monies that I was saying was being earned weekly
Uh-huh.
was exponential. So
Yeah.
wanted to get an understanding, and then also the location played a factor as well,
Yes.
where the business said it was located
Of
as well
course.
played a major factor. So there were some red flags in reference to what was being reported and what was being seen on the balance sheet. So a
Mhm.
site visit was conducted, and it showed where the owner was basically putting his own funds into the business and then depositing it through the bank. There was to no foot traffic. There wasn't any external orders. Nothing. So, you know, it didn't make sense logically. The business was opened, and within a week time, it was earning more than businesses that were open for years.
Gosh. So in the end, was it, you know, was he actually laundering money, or was he just using it as a
Well,
method of?
at that point in time, given the fact that the information he provided was not true, you know, we look at offboarding at that point in time. So
Yeah.
the risk was too high. We didn't want to take it on. It was a new customer as well, taking in consideration the framework. So you know, based on what we had, you know, it didn't go any deeper. Just
No.
the customer know that, you know, it's not.
You got to be very careful. That's very good. That's very good. So yes, you know, in business, there will be things that look unusual, and the site visit can help. We had a case like that where the activity through the business account was far exceeding, you know, what we thought the type of business could generate, just as Dimitri was saying. So by making a site visit, you can see, as he calls it, the footfall going through, and then you know the type of products they're selling. You know, you can easily find out what the sort of selling price of the products are, and you can try and estimate how many of those do you think they'll be selling, you know, in a day, and then multiply those number of items by a selling price. And it's not that difficult to do mathematically. Okay, it's not going to be exact, but it'll give you an indication. And if it's way out with the activity you're seeing through the bank account, it needs questioning. So very good comment there. Thank you, Dimitri. Okay, so let's move on from that, and we'll come back, as I say, to the business visit aspects, site visit, if you like to call it. Some American analysts call it kicking the tires, you know, where you go out on site and take your way around. There's a lot to come out of it, and we'll do more on that in module 2 when we talk about these site visits, these business visits, and we take a look at a business video film as well. So for the moment, we're going to now start our journey on the financial performance. And you'll see I've put the understanding the accounts, and I put 2 exclamation marks. Now, why I did that was slightly cynical, because it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, is actually understand the accounts. And in the case Dimitri illustrated there, you know, they were looking for something that wasn't being portrayed in the account. So what we'll be seeing with accounts is generally, of course, the accounts will be historical. You know, the quickest annual accounts I've ever seen produced was 3 months after the year end, and this was, you know, this is on a large corporate basis, so the accounts can be dated, and the standard of the accounts can vary widely and differ depending on the geographical jurisdictions. So the important thing which we want to establish is what is the true financial position of the business and its real cash generating capacity to cover any proposed dividend and debt repayments. So what we'll be doing is, you know, starting with the accounts and then moving beyond those. So if we can get access to the bank statements, which if the client's banking with our institution, we'll be able to see the business turnover. So that's the business sales. And, you know, how does that reflect our expectations? As Dimitri was just saying, what's the average bank balance? What's the range of the account that's moving from credit to debit? And what payments are going out, you know, from the account? And if we compare these statistics with previous years, we'll start to generate a financial picture. Now, I mentioned the annual accounts. So the accounts, as I said, could be historic, but they're well worth analyzing. Now, lots of banks and institutions have forms for extracting the ratios. We're looking for a reasonable balance between the net worth of the business and the debt. And then other ratios will give us indications of the liquidity, the debt serviceability, and the trading performance. Now, ratios, there are numerous ratios, and you can buy lots of books on ratio analysis. What we'll do is we'll focus on what we believe are the key ratios that should be used, which will be sufficient to give us a good understanding of the business performance, whether it's a small, medium, or large business. With a large business, particularly if they're quoted on the stock market, there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 additional stock market ratios that we'd want to build in. But basically, these core ratios will stand you in very good stead, and they've been recognized for many, many years by the Chartered Banker Institute, who, as you know, are the accreditors of this program and several of our other programs. So what I'm going to do very quickly is run you through some of these key ratios, and then, time permitting, we'll make a start on a practical example, which I hope will bring it to life. So when I'm talking about what these ratios are, for those of you who have never done this before, you'll find it a bit confusing, but I hope when we do, a practical example and make the calculations ourselves, it'll give us a good understanding where these figures come from. And because we're doing it ourselves, we'll have a good idea, where they are derived from. Now, a good starting point in any business is to start with the sales. That's the top line. That's a figure generally available from each and every business person. They might not know about all the liquidity and the balance sheet and this, that, and the other. But generally, I think every business person I ever met knows what their sales are. So a good starting point is to look at the sales, and are the sales growing? And there's the sales growth calculation, which we'll do, and we'll see how are sales growing. Does it meet with what we would expect for that particular type of business? And given the economic backdrop at the moment, for example, in one of the recessions we faced here in the UK, a number of our customers, their sales actually collapsed by approximately 50%, because of the severe recession that we're in. And a lot of businesses you will experience, and we experience globally, through COVID, will have had a sales decline. Gross profit is one of the key ratios, and we calculate that by taking the gross profit and dividing it by sales. And generally, we'll express this as a percentage. This is a very powerful indicator in business, because what we've got, you see, is the sales less the cost of sales to give us this gross profit. Now, the gross profit's very important because that gives the business the profit that's available to go towards the overhead costs, the fixed costs of the business, and later to service any debt requirement from the income statement. Our next stopping point down the income statement is we look at the operating profit. And generally, this is known as the profit before interest and tax. The American analysts will use, and some of you may have seen this, EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. So it's exactly the same. It's the operating profit margin. It's just the terminology is slightly different. So you might want to make a note of that, particularly if you're in discussion with an American business person or their finance director or an American analyst. They'll tend to talk about EBIT, and then they'll talk about EBITDA. EBITDA is a measurement of cash flow that we'll come on to. You've probably heard the expression. You might have seen it on the financial news from the States. And then what we've got is the pre-tax profit margin. So we're coming further down. And this is the net profit before tax divided by sales. And then the ratio that's missing off this sheet, so you're going to need to write this out yourselves. The next ratio is the bottom line position. So we've got pre-tax profit, but what we're also, of course, very, very interested in is what's the net profit position. So we need to come down to the net profit, that's the bottom line position in the income statement, and divide that by sales. So you'll see all these early calculations were all reflecting back in the income statement to the sales position. So we're really doing a deep analysis of the income statement.
Mr.
Now,
Chuckley, could you
yes.
just repeat that again so we can write down that formula
Yes.
correctly, please?
Yep, sure. So you'll see that one that we were looking at is pre-tax profits. So that says net profit before tax divided by sales, multiplied by 100. So what I'm asking you to write down is the one that will come after the tax is paid. So what we'll be down to is what we would call the net profit. So that's the bottom line position in the income statement. So what you need to write down is net profit divided by sales and multiplied by 100, and that will equal the net profit percentage. Okay with that?
So would we say net profit after tax there?
No, no. They'll have paid the tax, but what we're calling it is net profit because it's the bottom line position, yes?
Okay.
It will be net profit after tax, but if there's a dividend, there'll be a dividend payment, featuring somewhere as well. So what we're looking for is the net profit, the bottom line position. If you want to write that down, the bottom line position in any business, yeah, it could be, a store in Bay Street there, could be the Hilton Hotel on the corner, could be Atlantis Hotel, could be anything you want to pick up, yeah. Net profit position, very important. So top line will be important, the sales. Those various ratios will help us determine how the business is performing, and then we come right down to the bottom line position. And if Miguel's still listening, that's the line he likes. He loves to get down to the bottom line position. Now, the next bunch of ratios, they come from the balance sheet. So you'd see those ratios we've been looking at come from the income statement. Now, these will come from the balance sheet. So these can be known as liquidity ratios or efficiency ratios. And the first one is a very frequently calculated accounting style ratio, which is for the working capital, which we take the current assets from the balance sheet and we deduct the current liabilities, and that will give us a working capital figure. As I say, this bit is, Candice has got a question.
Mr. Chuckley, I know I'm pushing ahead, but I just want to get an understanding. These ratios, do we need to remember these and the breakdown which equals each other for, let's say, for the exam or?
No, you don't, but you do need to know exactly where they are in your notes. As we work through the businesses that we're going to be looking at, I think what you'll develop over the program is you will memorize a number of them through usage. And if you use them and practice them, it's really, really good for you, because when you get, a business client sitting opposite to you, you're not sort of scratching your way through the notes trying to figure out these different things. Yes. So I know they look a lot to start with, but when we've done them a few times, you'll start to get them, and they'll be really powerful for you going forward in business. So very good question. I tell you what I think we'll do is, we'll not go on to the balance sheet ratios for the moment. What we'll do, I think, which will probably help your understanding, is if we focus on these income statement ratios, and let's take a look add a case study. Do you think that's a good idea? And we can start by looking at these income ratios, and that will help you get an understanding of what we're doing. So do you think that's a good idea, Candice? You raised the point.
Whatever the class wants and what you say is best. We just want to get the most of it.
Yeah. Anybody got any views on this? Would you like to work those income statement ratios first?
Yes,
Yes.
whatever you
that's
think
good.
is best, Mr. Jackley.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. So what we need to do then is we've been working our way through, you know, those first bunch of ratios. So you're going to have to focus on these profitability ratios, which come from the income statement. So we're going to look going forward a few pages. After the ratios, you'll come to the case study, which is called clothing imports. So as you might imagine, it's an importer of clothes. So they're a wholesale style business. They're going to import clothes and then sell them to retail stores who will attempt to sell them to you. So just for the moment, we're going to look at the income statement. There it is. It's called the profit and loss accounts. And what we're going to do is to start this off, we've only got like 10 minutes to go, but we'll make a start on looking at how we'd calculate these income ratios based on this particular case study. So you can see, if we take year one just to begin with, and here's your ratio calculation sheet, look. So remember, I said the first ratio was sales growth. So we're going to be looking at the sales and how they've grown from the previous year. Now, we can't do it for year one because we don't know what the year was before year one. So our first calculation of sales growth is not applicable in our ratio sheet. So on that sales growth, you could put NA there. And let's look at the second ratio for year one, which is the gross profit margin. I know I'm going quickly on this, but you can take your time and review it later. The next ratio is the gross profit percentage. So we take the gross profit, and remember I was saying we equate all these things back to sales. So we divide the 90,000 by 900,000, and we multiply by 100 to give us it as a percentage. So without using a calculator, 90 divided by 900 and then multiplied by 100, we're going to get 10%. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I was trying to get it on the screen, but I can't get it at the same time. Okay, so I'll rely on you. Next line on the ratios was the operating profit. And I said to you, that's profit before interest and tax. And you can see why it's called that, because you can see interest is there, look. And tax is a bit further down. So this is the profit that's generated from the operations of the business. So it's a very powerful ratio. As I say, the Americans call this EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. So all these calculations go back to sales, as I was saying. So we've got 33,000 divided by 900,000 and multiplied by 100, and we're going to get the profit before interest and tax, and probably Candice is going to give us this figure very quickly.
Can you say that again?
Yep, operating profit divided by sales. So it's 33,000 divided by sales of 900,000 multiplied by 100, and you're going to give me it as a percentage.
33,000 divided by 900,000.
Correct. Do it on your phone or on the calculator if you've got it on the computer there.
And then you say then times it by 100%.
100.
Multiply by 100 to give us it as a percentage.
Okay. 100. I don't think my calculation is right.
What'd you get?
7%.
I get like 4.
4%? Anybody confirm that? So
Huh?
operating,
3.67.
sorry, say that again, say that again.
3.67, so like roughly 4%.
You're breaking up, can you put it in the chat box? So 33,000 divided by 900,000 times 100 will give us the gross profit percentage, 3.67 we're offered.
That's one given.
Anyone confirm that? 3.7% approximately?
Okay.
Good, Paul has got the same, that's great. Now, what I would suggest to you is, because, you know, you're going to be dealing in real life situations with real business people, we don't work things to the 2 decimal points because it's too academic looking, yeah? So the business person, you know, won't respond too well to you, you know, if you say, oh, well, I'll get your profit, operating profit to be 3.67. So what we tend to do is we approximate it to the nearest point. So 0.65 and above, 0.66, 0.67, we would round it up to 0.7, yeah? So you put in the chart there, 3.7. So we got sales growth not applicable, gross profit 10%, operating margin 3.7%. So that's a lot lower, you know, than the gross profit because of the overhead costs. Let's go to the pre-tax profit margin. So pre-tax profit margin is there, look, profit before tax. So that's pre-tax profit margin. So this time we've got 2 to do before we close. $25,000 divided by 900,000 and multiplied by 100, and that will give us the pre-tax profit margin. Someone stick it in the box again, please. So it's going to be less than 3.7 because we've got some more expenses there. Anyone got the figure? So we had operating profit at 3.7, then they're paying interest. So what's the profit before tax? 2.8 were offered by Tronique. Anyone confirm 2.8? Good. Excellent, thanks, Sophia. So 2.8 goes in our chart. So we've got gross profit 10%, operating margin 3.7, pre-tax profit 2.8, and the final one for Saturday morning, the net profit margin, which I asked you to write down, is the net profit bottom line position. Look, there's the bottom line, 17,000. And as Candice mentioned, you know, this is the profit after tax in most business cases, unless there's a dividend payment. So there's the 17,000, look, for the net profit. So final calculation, divide 17,000 by 900,000 and multiply by 100, and we'll get the net profit as a percentage for our final ratio on the income statement. Okay, 1.9 we're offered. Anyone confirm 1.9? Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so that's it for this morning. But what we will say just before we close is, you can run those profitability ratios, as they're known as by most people, in any type of business. This could be the Atlantis Group if you wanted. It could be a store in Bay Street. So we'd be looking for the sales growth. What's the gross profit margin? 10%. Now, as you build up your business experience and data, 10%, that means out of every $100 of sales, the clothing business is generating $10, because it's 10%, towards the remaining costs in the income statement. Now, I don't know what your instant reaction to that is, but it's quite low, isn't it? However, you have to bear in mind the nature of the business. So what you need to do is try and compare that, with your experience on other wholesalers, because don't forget, they're buying these goods in, but then they're going to have to on-sell to retailers. So the margin in wholesaling generally is quite low. So 10% there. Operating profit coming down a bit further to 3.7, pre-tax at 2.8, and net profit 1.9. So I mean, I like to do this. You probably won't find it in most accounting textbooks, but what I like to do is bring things back to equating them, into numbers that we can put forward as financial planners or as wealth managers. So what that means is for every $100 of sales in this clothing import business, they're generating $1.90 approximately bottom line profit. Excuse me. So quite a fine net profit margin. I think you'll agree. Okay, well, thanks for participating this morning. And next week we'll continue with our business analysis. If you get a chance before we meet next week, I'd recommend you just take a look through, those ratio calculations there that are on those pages, and then we'll work them through on the clothing imports case. We'll look at the liquidity and the efficiency ratios, and then we'll look at some of the financing ratios by way of interest cover and gearing. Everybody okay with that?
Should we
Yes.
finish it off for year 2 and year 3?
Say again?
Should we complete the summary ratio sheet? Year 2, year 3, complete it out, or?
Well, that would be very nice. If you'd like to do that on the profitability ratios, that would be a great idea. And then we'll continue next week off to a flying start.
Okay.
And if the other people don't have time, we can all rely on Candice to provide us with the ratios next week. And I'm pretty sure Dimitri will probably be beavering away as well. Okay, well, thanks very much for participating, and we're making good progress, and we'll continue next week and explore this case study business, and we will see, when we've got all these figures, we'll see, how is the business performing, and we start to understand the business from a financial perspective. And then, of course, we need to cross to the other side and try and enhance our analysis by including some of the non-financial issues. Okay, well, thanks very much. Have a nice Saturday afternoon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Getting pretty
Have
dark.
a great day, guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, thanks for your
Bye.
participation. Really good. Thank you.
Good day.
Don't worry, Marcel, that you were a bit late checking on. You can see the recording. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Bye for now.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.